come to order. Without objection, we'll revert to messages from the Senate.
Message from the Senate. This is the Paymar motion. Mr. Speaker, I hereby announce that the Senate has concurred in and adopted a report of the Conference Committee on Senate File 671, an act relating to public safety. Conference Committee report on 671, addressed to the Honorable Sandra L. Pappas, President of the Senate, the Honorable Paul Thiessen, Speaker of the House. We, the undersigned conferees for Senate File 671, report that we've agreed upon the items in dispute and recommend as follows. The report is signed by all 5 conferees on the part of the Senate and all 5 conferees on the part of the House. Paymar moves that the report of the Conference Committee in House File 671 be adopted and that the bill be repassed as amended by conference.
I recognize the author, Representative Paymar, who will explain the report.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. Let me first start off by thanking the Conference Committee for their hard work in getting this done. Representative Hillstrom, Representative Lesh, Representative Moline, and Representative Cornish. And I'd also like to thank my committee administrator, Laura Taken-Holtze, and my committee legislative assistant, DJ Danielson, and the committee administrator for Representative Lesh and Representative Hillstrom, who helped us in Conference Committee, Charlotte Anton, and our fiscal staff, John Waltz, and nonpartisan research, Jeff Diebel, Becky Pirius, and Kate Weeks and John Holquist, DFL and GOP staff. We had a good conference committee, and I think we came up with a good product. We were $102 million above the base. $50.5 million was from public safety, and $52.1 million above base from judiciary. One thing that we agreed to do with the Senate, I'm just going to try to highlight a little bit of the bill, but also explain some of the differences between the House bill and the Senate bill. We did agree to eliminate the base increases from all of the divisions in the public safety account, and I'm going to go through that account, and then I will yield the floor to Representative Hillstrom, and she will go through the judiciary accounts. So, Madam Speaker, first, just to briefly talk about the Department of Corrections, and we appropriate about $969 million to the Department of Corrections over the biennium. This is a $30 million employee compensation agreement between the union and the state to avoid any layoffs at the Department of Corrections and make sure that our institutions are safe. We also have a $2.6 million transfer from the MinCorp account, and this is providing additional sex offender and chemical dependency training beds. When the bill left the House, the money was appropriated specifically for sex offender treatment beds, and the agreement was that we would allow the department to make the decision whether they wanted to use that money for sex offender treatment or chemical dependency treatment. As I said, when the bill came out of the House, only 30% of sex offenders who are in the Department of Corrections prisons are actually getting sex offender treatment. The other provision that is a little bit different from when it left the House, as we talked about before, because of the Affordable Care Act, there's some significant savings in health care due to MA costs that will now be picked up by the federal government. And originally in our bill we had left that solely to the Department of Corrections, those savings, and in the Conference Committee what we decided to do was to fund some additional probation officers in CCA counties as well as county probation. So this bill, and we also use some of that savings to provide funds for the Safe Harbor project, which under the Office of Justice Programs, which is the money that will be used for Ramsey County to develop their program to reduce trafficking of children. That will be a model program, and for training that will occur by Ramsey County to probation officers, police officers, and other practitioners in the criminal justice system. So and then the Department of Public Safety has a $319 million, roughly $320 million appropriation over the biennium. We funded the governor's recommendation to create a school safety center, $810,000 over the biennium. This goes to the Homeland Security and Emergency Management, and the School Safety Center is a program that we had several years ago, and then when the federal grant ran out, we stopped funding it. This is, of course, in response to some of the school shootings that we've had in Minnesota and around the country. And the idea behind this school safety center is to provide technical assistance to our school districts and to our schools on what to do when there is an emergency, if there is a shooting, if the school has to go down to lockdown. And we've included some rider language because some of the committee and the conference committee, frankly, was concerned about how we would measure success, and we have some rider language to ensure that the Department of Public Safety reports back on how effective this program is. In the BCA, we appropriate $500,000 for the biennium for ongoing repair and replacement of lab equipment. We appropriate $800,000 for the biennium to fund 2 additional drug chemists and 2 additional toxicologists to reduce some of the backlog of cases at the BCA lab. We did fund for the biennium a critical priority that the department wanted, and as part of the governor's recommendations, the House and the Senate both agreed to fund the criminal history system. This is a system that contains information on persons that have been arrested for felonies and gross misdemeanors in the state, and it provides critical data to interveners in the criminal justice system. This is an obsolete data system, and it currently doesn't allow a lot of the current systems to talk to each other because they don't integrate because of this antiquated system. The criminal reporting system was another priority project. This one is used to report crime statistics to the FBI and is required by every state in the country. Our system is now 40 years old, and again, it's antiquated. It needs to be replaced. We funded we appropriated $699,000 for the biennium for ongoing maintenance of our LifeScan machines, and both the Senate and the House agreed that we would not fund the data analytics project that was requested by the department in this biennium. It was a lower priority than the other systems. In the Office of Justice Programs, we appropriated an additional $3 million for crime victim grants. So these go out to your battered women's shelters, your sexual assault programs, and your general crime victim programs throughout the state. This after cuts over a period of time, and this was also a governor's recommendation, and both the Senate and the House agreed to this. We had a slight difference over youth intervention programs. We eventually came to the conclusion that we would appropriate $2 million additionally in grants that go to the youth intervention program. This was a Simon bill, and This is new money that must be used to create new programs statewide, especially in underserved areas. We also appropriated $200,000 for a reentry program. This was in Duluth. This was a Simonson bill. Wasn't quite what they had asked for, but it'll keep this reentry program alive, which is in desperate need of funding, that provides counseling and program assistance to offenders who are leaving the prison system, to hopefully allow them to better reintegrate back into society and not return to prison. Again, as I mentioned, the sex trafficking program to Ramsey County. There's a Detmer bill in here that for returning veterans who are suffering from PTSD, and this is a grant to the Upper Midwest Community Policing Institute to train police officers on how to de-escalate situations that they might encounter from returning veterans who get in trouble with the law. And then there's a dean provision in here that is for the Juvenile Detention Alternatives Initiative to try to ensure that some young people are not being incarcerated who don't necessarily have to be, that they find alternative situations for them. And that was in the amount of $100,000, and I should have said that the de-escalation grant was also $100,000. The Department of Human Rights, the Senate and the House agreed to an additional $129,000 to hire 2 additional enforcement officers dedicated to contract compliance, and there's additional money to the Post Board, and this is $200,000 for the biennium. $100,000 is for the Post Board, but $100,000 is actually specified to train police officers on dealing with sexually exploited and trafficked youth. So that basically is the public safety portion of the bill. And Madam Speaker, I would then yield to Representative Hillstrom, who will discuss the Judiciary Division.
The member from Hennepin, Representative Hillstrom.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. Members, I'll highlight the differences between the House and the Senate provisions that ended up in the conference committee. When the Judiciary Finance budget left, we had salary increases for judges at 3% and 3%, and the Senate had it at 4% and 4%. And our 1% difference in that first year was that the pension piece, or the pension fix for judges, was actually being carried in the pension bill. And so in conference, we agreed to a salary increase to 4% in the first year, with that 1% going to fund pensions and 3% in the second year. The judges' pension piece, again, was originally carried in the pension bill, but is now completely included in this conference committee. We also removed the 1% increase that we had to agencies that was above the governor's budget as part of the original agreement. We took the Senate's position on civil legal services. The civil legal services appropriation is $1.25 million per year additional. We were able to retain Representative Moline's Court of Appeals provision. However, it was limited to 5 years. So that will only be in law for 5 years, and then will be subject to review. We were successful in keeping the House's position on specialty courts. However, we originally had it funded at $925,000 per year, and that has been reduced to $875,000 per year. We believe that that will allow us to retain the specialty courts that we currently have, and will allow for 2 additional courts to be expanded. Specialty courts include veterans courts, drug courts, DWI courts, domestic abuse courts. So we're very pleased to have been able to retain that. The Senate did not have that provision at all. We ended up needing to give a slight bump increase to the tax court judges, because it actually says in the statutes that when we give a raise to judges in the district court area, that we also have to give it to the tax court. So we did come up a little bit in our tax court appropriation. And then we added a $50,000 case management support staff support system, which was in the Senate's position. We successfully kept the House's public defender appropriation. The Senate had a different amount. However, we lost $37,000 from what we had originally appropriated. And then the House position was taken on the guardian and conservator provisions that were in the bill as it left. The biggest change in this bill is that the fees that were in this bill to fund it when it left the House are removed. So there is no fee for the criminal traffic surcharge in this bill. It's not in there. There is no fee for the conciliation court going to a graduated system. It's not in the bill. And there is not the fee for the bond reinstatement. So when this bill left, there was $22 million in fees. Those are not in the bill. The only fee that is still in the bill is the court technology fee. I think everyone in the body agreed that technology was important, and there was an amendment that was offered by the Republicans to just limit it to 2 years, and so we did do a modification in conference committee. So that fee will be at a reduced amount, so it's still $2, but it's on a limited number of filings. So instead of originally generating $5 million a biennium and ongoing forever, now it will generate $700,000 in the first year, $900,000 in the second year, and ongoing at $900,000, but it's capped at 5 years. So it really raises the same a little under $5 million now that it would have raised in one biennium, and that's spread out over 5 years. Members, one of the pieces that is new in policy to this bill it relates to data collection. Members, there's a provision in this bill that currently it's called a data integration project. And this legislation was passed by the Senate, and it collects the civil commitment records, it electronically scans them, and it sends it to the National Instant Criminal Background Check System. Members, one of the things that we found is that since 1994, people who have been civilly committed and found to be either mentally ill or dangerous, that all of those records didn't make it to the background check system. And that is very troubling. So we have funded that project at $1,050,000 to make certain that everyone who has been found to be civilly committed, that information actually makes it to the database. So when people run background checks for the purposes of getting a gun, that the accurate data is actually in there. We also adopted an amendment from Representative Moline, which says that if they had their rights restored, that data needs to make certain that it gets to the background check system. This language actually came from the Sheriff's Association. We had it in a bill here in the House. It was not heard. The court anticipates that approximately 67,000 cases will need to be reviewed, scanned, and entered into the NICS database system. Members, this language also requires timely reporting of the gross misdemeanor disqualifying offenses. Currently, under Minnesota law, we have some gross misdemeanor offenses that make folks ineligible to possess a firearm. This makes no changes of any kind to the standards. This just requires timely reporting of the information to the background check system so that when those background checks are done, the information is accurate. And we have 2 new reports that are in the bill, and this was an agreement based on the House conferees and the Senate conferees. The first is with the public defender money, we want to report back to say what did they use the money for. We think that it's appropriate for accountability purposes. And then the second report actually was in another bill in the House. It was a House position in another bill, and it talks about the juvenile justice system and looking at that system and have a report back to us to make certain that we make some progress on reducing the number of suspense files and to facilitate reduction in those files and to get this group really talking about ways that we can improve the system. And so, members, with that, I will yield back to Representative Paymar.
Representative Paymar.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Well, I just two things I neglected to say is that the fire marshal account and the gambling is the governor's recommendations, and the Senate and the House both agreed to that base funding. And we did not touch the fire safety account. There was a $500,000 appropriation to the Gambling and Alcohol Enforcement Division at the Department of Public Safety, and that was needed for enforcement efforts on the e-pull tabs for ostensibly for the paying off the bonds for the Viking Stadium. With that, Representative Hillstrom and I would stand for questions.
Discussion to the conference committee report. There being no further discussion, the member from Olmsted, Representative Quam.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I just it dawned on me the last comment by the representative. Can he yield for clarification?
Representative Paymar will yield. Representative Quam.
Thank you. The last statement was did not touch the fire safety account, and I remembered when I scanned through that on page 10, lines 22 through 27, says you've got $2,368,000 the first year, and the same the second year are for transfers to the general fund. And on 1018, it indicates that this is appropriation from the fire safety account. So I'm trying to understand how you can transfer, a little under $7 million to the general fund and not be touching the fire safety fund.
Representative Paymar.
Madam Speaker, Representative Quam, this is boilerplate language that we use every year. It's ongoing funding to the fire marshal's office for their operating. The fire safety account is the special revenue fund that in the past this legislature and different bienniums has taken money out of that fire safety account and used it for other purposes. That's the reason why I highlighted it this year, is that we did not do that. And that money stays in that account for training of firefighters throughout the state.
Representative Quam.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So I'm to understand that the wording, in my copy of the report, which says for transfers to the general fund are not transfers to the general fund. I guess I'm confused. That these words seem pretty straightforward.
He will yield. Representative Paymar.
Madam Speaker, Representative Quam, this was language that was statutorily changed many years ago. This is the boilerplate language we use every year to fund the fire marshal.
Representative Quam.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So now I understand that it's just continuing a practice, and I just once again, as in other bills, would say I don't like this practice of taking from special funds and transferring directly into the general fund. If there are special training programs or other things that are being funded by this, it'd be much more transparent if right in that section that expenditure for the appropriate related activity was noted, instead of saying, well, we got to transfer X amount of money into the general fund. And I'm sorry, when you mentioned none, it popped into mind that there was some. So thank you for the clarification that this is just continuation of a bad practice.
Representative Paymar.
The fiscal staff informs me that this is always the way that this fund has been set up.
There being no further discussion, all those in favor of the motion to adopt the Conference Committee report on Senate File 671, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, please say no. The motion prevails. The clerk will give the bill its third reading as amended by conference. Oh, The report is adopted.
Third reading, Senate File 671 as amended by conference.
Third reading as amended by conference. Any further discussion? Seeing none, the clerk will take the roll. The clerk will close the roll. There being 121 ayes and 12 nays, the bill is repassed as amended by conference and its title agreed to.
Message from the Senate. This is the Hansen motion. Mr. Speaker, I hereby announce that the Senate has concurred in and adopted a report of the Conference Committee on Senate File 840, an act relating to employment. Conference Committee report on Senate File 840 addressed to the Honorable Sandra L. Pappas, President of the Senate, the Honorable Paul Thiessen, Speaker of the House. We, the undersigned conferee, on Senate File 840, report that we've agreed upon the items in dispute and recommend as follows. The report is signed by all three conferees on the part of the House and on the Senate and all three conferees on the part of the House. Hansen moves that the report of the Conference Committee on Senate File 840 be adopted and that the bill be repassed as amended by conference.
I recognize the author, Representative Hansen, who will explain the report.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. This is the Conference Committee on Sick Leave for taking parents for medical appointments. It had passed the House with 100 votes a couple of weeks ago. We had a Conference Committee yesterday with Representative Kiefer, Representative Moline, and myself, Senator Champion, Senator Hayden, and Senator Nelson. And we made some changes to the bill after working since passage with the advocates on both sides of the issue. And the primary change is we have placed a cap on the amount of sick leave that can be used for this new leave. That is 160 hours in a calendar year. And this amount was achieved through some negotiation with the parties. In addition, we added a report from the Commissioner Management and Budget to look at the implementation, how many hours are actually used during the coming year, and would report back to the legislature on implementation. I would urge adoption of the report.
Is there any discussion of the Conference Committee report? The member from Hennepin, Representative Anderson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Would Representative Hansen yield?
He will yield. Representative Anderson.
Representative Hansen, as I'm looking at the Conference Committee report, as I'm looking at the Conference Committee report, as I read it, it's not a cap. It says to no less than 160 hours. So as I read this, when you say no less than 160 hours, that means that that's the floor, and then it can go beyond 160 hours. Was that your intent? Because as I read it and as this will be interpreted, this is the floor.
Representative Hansen.
Madam Speaker and Representative Anderson, that's a good question. I want to be clear that we're talking about accrued leave. So this is a leave that an employee has accrued, and the intent, and this is the language that was suggested by council during the report, and we had some discussion about this, that 160 is the cap that can go if the employer approves additional, they can do that, but it's intended as a cap, not as a floor.
Representative Anderson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So, Representative Hansen, what you're saying is this is the cap for the employer, that they cannot limit their employee any lower than 160 hours. So the employee at least is guaranteed 160 hours of taking the sick leave, but it can go well beyond that. So that's my understanding. Is that correct?
Representative Hansen.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. If this becomes law, an employee can request and receive 160 hours of sick leave for the purposes identified in the statute. The employer can grant additional leave beyond the 160 if they choose.
Representative Anderson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And Representative Hansen, what happens if they accrue less than 160 hours of sick leave?
Representative Hansen.
Madam Speaker and Representative Anderson, let me use an example. Let's say the employee has accrued 40 hours of sick leave. That is all that they could use. They can only use what they have accrued. And we had testimony during the conference committee that and maybe Representative Molina or Kiefer can help me on this. I think it was 96 hours or 104 hours are the average that an employee would be generally accruing. That's an average. So you're under that as an average. People are going to, employees may be using that sick leave. They may have only 40 hours on the books. That's all they could use. They cannot, there is no requirement that if they have only accrued 40 hours under this law that the employer would provide them with the additional.
Representative Anderson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Representative Hansen, can you point out where it says that in the bill? Because as I read it, it doesn't say that. It says that the employer themselves must grant a minimum of 160 hours, but they are allowed to grant more than that. And it doesn't say anywhere in the piece of legislation that if an employee only has 40 hours accrued, that they are limited to that amount that's accrued. Is that somewhere else in statute that's already currently defined?
Representative Hansen.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And Representative Anderson, I think you might have answered your own question there right at the end. If you look at the statute that we are amending, and I have not pulled it up, but from memory, that 181.9413 sick leave, it talks about the definition, and so we're dealing with accrued leave.
Representative Anderson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. As I'm getting that section pulled up, I do have another question for Representative Hansen. As I understand the fiscal note that was prepared for this bill, we're looking at a cost to the state of $9.5 million. And perhaps this is a better question for Representative Carlson. Representative Carlson, given that this is not a negligible amount that we're spending here, where is this going to be accounted for in our state budget targets? If you could help me out there, please.
He will yield. Representative Carlson.
Madam Speaker, Representative Anderson, that would, if there were any costs, that would have to be absorbed by the state agencies.
Representative Anderson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and Representative Carlson. You know, we've been doing that a lot this session, having the state agencies absorb these costs. Can you tell me what is the total amount that the agencies have been absorbing between the state contracts that we've had? I think we're up to 6 or 7 state contracts. We've got this here now of the $9.5 million, and this is ongoing costs too. Can you tell me what is the total amount that state agencies are absorbing since the session started?
Representative Carlson.
Madam Speaker, Representative Anderson, I don't have those numbers before me, but if I recall correctly, I think you're a member of the Ways and Means Committee, and when those bills went through, Mr. Hubinger shared with the committee at that point in time what the costs are. I think if you checked with Mr. Hubinger, he could probably give you those numbers.
Representative Anderson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Well, Representative Carlson, can you give me a ballpark figure of what we're talking about? Anywhere? Do you have any idea, ballpark figure of where we're at?
Representative Anderson requests Representative Carlson to yield. He will yield. Representative Carlson.
Madam Speaker, as I just indicated, I don't have those numbers here. I think if you checked with Mr. Hubinger, he could share that with you. Those contracts, just as a reminder, were the a relatively short period of time. They were the last 6 months, and we were told at the time those bills went through that the state agencies were anticipating those costs and had incurred savings within the state agencies in a variety of ways to cover those costs, so there was not an appropriation that was needed. But there was an estimate by Mr. Hubinger on each of those contracts as to what the costs were.
Representative Anderson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, Representative Carlson. I will contact him to find out what the total costs are. I do have concerns that we are looking at a $9.5 million cost to the state. But Representative Hansen, since I've been having a conversation with Representative Carlson, I did have a chance to pull up here Minnesota Statute 181.943. But I'm not really seeing where it addresses the issue of what you're talking about. So if you can help me out and give me a little greater comfort that what we're looking at is what you said is going to actually happen.
Representative Anderson, did you ask Representative Carlson to yield? Representative Anderson.
Madam Speaker, if Representative Hansen would yield, please.
Representative Hansen will yield. Representative Hansen.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Hansen, Carlson, Anderson, Representative Anderson. I think if you look at the bill on the second page and existing statute line 2.1, for the purposes of this section, personal sick leave benefits means time accrued and available to an employee. There you go. That's it in existing statute. The bill modifies existing statute, and this is for the purpose of this section. It's accrued time. So if they haven't accrued it, they don't get it.
The member from Scott, Representative Albright.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And would Representative Hansen yield for a question?
He will yield. Representative Albright.
Thank you. Representative Hansen, I'm looking at the section of the code 181.9413, which does relate to sick or injured child care leave, and so I'll agree with and I concur with the language here, but as I look at line 1.25, as it would relate to what is said on line 1.27, you're suggesting an employer may limit to no less than 160 hours. That's just, it doesn't work. It doesn't make sense. Now, you might say may limit to no more than, but this makes it read as if it starts at a threshold of 160 hours. So my suggestion is that we rewrite this so that if the intention is to provide for 160 hours, then it has to be reworded in such a fashion that that is the max in concurrence with sick leave available, as opposed to starting there. Would Representative Hansen yield for explanation to that?
He will yield. Representative Hansen.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And Representative Albright, I think if you read the language, that's the new language. An employer may limit the use of personal sick leave benefits provided by the employer for absences due to an illness of or injury to an employee's adult child, spouse, sibling, parent, grandparent, or step-parent no less than 160 hours. So that is the limit. So I know it may not seem that way, but that's the limit, which means that they can't limit below 160. Do you understand what I'm saying? So that means the 160 is the ceiling, because they can't limit below that. They can't go down to say it's only 40 hours. The accrual is what provides the limitation. The accrual, if they've only accrued 40 hours, that becomes a limitation. But the limitation is on the 160, so then that 160 becomes the ceiling.
Representative Albright.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Representative Hansen, I think you just answered the concern. That is the beginning. You're limiting it to no less than 160 hours. Am I understanding what you just said? Representative Hansen, would he yield?
He will yield. Representative Hansen.
Well, I think, Representative Albright, the key here is when this passed off the floor, there was no limit on the amount of sick leave that could be applied for this new use. What the conference committee has done has applied a limit, which is no less than 160 hours.
Representative Albright.
There's a limit, but a limit means there's a finite stop. So where's the stop? Is it at 160 hours, or does that the start at 160 hours? Would Representative Hansen yield?
He will yield. Representative Hansen.
Madam Speaker and Representative Albright, 160 hours. The employer can choose to go greater than 160, but if the accrual is there, the stop is at 160 hours.
Representative.
Under the bill.
Oh, sorry. Representative Albright.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I don't know how to convey the definitional difference that we have come across, the impasse. And I think Representative Anderson also concurs with this, that there's an ambiguity here that we are searching to understand. So would Representative Moline yield to give explanation to this?
She will yield. Representative Moline.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and Representative Albright. What we're talking about here is when this bill passed off the House floor, there was no limitation, meaning that had you accrued more than 160 hours or any amount of time, your employer would have had to have allowed you to use that to care for a sick loved one. What happened in conference committee is we put that limitation of 160 hours on there, so even though you would have accrued more time than that, the employer is now able to limit that to 160 hours.
Representative Albright.
I'll agree to disagree and say that the cap is not there, that this is ambiguous, and I don't agree with the language.
Is there any further discussion to the conference committee report? Representative Hansen.
Madam Speaker, I'd like to ask for roll call.
Madam Speaker.
Representative Runbeck.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I
Hold
wonder,
on a second. I thought it pertained to the roll call. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Representative Runbeck.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Would the author please yield for a question?
He will. Representative Runbeck.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And Representative Hansen, what is the employee break point in terms of making this mandate? Do we have a tier of small employers versus large employers?
Representative Hansen.
Yes, Madam Speaker and Representative Runbeck, and I don't know if you have the statute pulled up in front of you, but this relation, I think it's, if you can give me a moment, because there is a limit on it. There's a limit on the size of the employer. 21 employees and up. So if you have fewer than 21 employees, this provision does not apply.
Representative Runbeck.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Well, Representative Hansen, was there discussion about raising that? I know there's oftentimes another tier at about 50 employees. I mean, the point kind of is that as a small employer, you don't have a lot of latitude to have extra people to fill in like very large employers do. So I'm curious if there was a discussion on that point.
Representative Hansen will yield. Representative Hansen.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And Representative Runbeck, we had quite a bit of discussion about many employers have moved both in the private sector and in the public sector to paid time off rather than having the traditional, and this provision would not apply to any of those systems. So if they have a paid time off where you can take time for vacation or sick leave that you have accrued, this does not apply. This would apply where you have the traditional program of vacation time and sick time. And that's primarily what we spent our discussion, a lot of discussion about that as we were in the conference committee about there's changes that are occurring throughout both the private sector and the public sector and a movement towards more paid time off.
Representative Runbeck.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So it sounds like we're safe to conclude that this benefit is going to go to large employers who have the flexibility, who have the people power to do the backup and so on and so forth. But I think a point that hasn't been made about this issue is that employers like to get credit for doing good things for their employees. Employers like to be known as being a good and generous employer, and every time government steps in and says, we're going to mandate this, we're going to mandate you do this, we're going to mandate, this new benefit, that employer who's been trying to be so good and generous, all of a sudden, it gets no credit whatsoever. So the continuation of sort of incrementally mandating more and more on employers that comes from government makes everyone think that only good employers become good because of government. So I just kind of am irritated about this. I understand it's part of the incremental, I guess, increasing whatever. But thank you very much.
The member from Washington, Representative Kiefer.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd like to just clarify this a little bit because I think there's a lot of confusion about this bill. When you look at line 1.2, for purpose of the section, personal sick leave means the accrued time available to the employee. Now, if a contractor or an employee, and this calls for private businesses, a lot of times they're at PTO, which is the personal time off. This does not affect that kind of contract. The problem is coming from the public employee contracts where they're allowed to accrue time and time and time and time. So they came to us in conference committee and asked for some kind of guarantee that we would have some kind of limit, and that's where we came with the floor. I want my colleagues to know, actually everyone to know, that I actually was asking for us to make it 80-hour floor, but I was not, I was a lonely voice on that one. So I just want to maybe make sure that the author knows that we could possibly relook at this next year if it is becoming a problem. The counties come to us. On the cost to the counties, most of these people get that reimbursement at the end anyway when they're retired. So the cost thing is, it's not a dynamic fiscal note, so that's part of the problem. It's a lot of uncertainty about how that's really going to affect it, so this is something that they just want to try. I wanted to let members know that the Chamber of Commerce does not oppose this bill, and that this, I know you got a letter from small businesses. Unfortunately, the lobbyist for that group was not at the conference committee, so we had no input from them until much later than after we signed this. And I would ask that maybe if this does become a problem, like I said, we could look at a cap next year. I hope that clarifies some things about the bill, and either way, I think we can try it out. I'm going to support the bill at this point, and possibly look at changing it in the next year. Thank you, Madam Chair.
The member from Waseca, Representative Petersburg.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Would Representative Hansen stand for a question?
He will yield. Representative Petersburg.
I think what I'd like to do is just clarify again the same language issue that we have, and I'll phrase it in just a different way, because I think the language itself is going to require judicial clarification if we don't do something. But in 2.1, when you define personal sick leave benefits, meaning time accrued, then you can insert time accrued for those words in the previous section. So then it would read in line 1.25, an employer may limit the use of time accrued to no less than 160 hours. And so basically what that means is that you can accrue all you want, but the employer is required under that section to limit no less than 160 hours for time accrued, whether it's there or not. And so I think that's the confusion that the language has, and I know it's not the intent, but you can see where that kind of definitions can be a problem. And I don't, I mean, you can answer that, but I'm not going to ask anything more. But.
Representative Hansen.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I think I've answered this before, but it's the limitation. The 160 hours is the limit that can be applied to that. If an employee has not accrued 160 hours, they don't get 160 hours. They've only accrued 40 hours. So the existing statute relates to this whole section in terms of the definition of accrued time available. I think during this debate, members, we've lost a little bit of the discussion about why we're doing this, and that the state made a decision 20 years ago. If you look back on when this original statute for time for children was passed into law, it was a generation ago. And now we've all gotten a little older. We have issues with our parents, our grandparents, siblings, and if any of you have been through the cycle with diagnosis, with treatment, with medical issues, leading to the finality of life, this is a time that can be very stressful for the employee and the employer. And we did have discussion during the conference committee, and this conference committee had about an hour and 45 minutes of testimony and discussion. It was probably the longest amount of discussion to give every opportunity for the advocates on both sides of the issue to come to the table and to try to work that out. And that's what we did here. We're expanding the existing statute to provide the leave for employees to take their parents or grandparents or other family members to the doctor using accrued sick leave that they've already obtained. We had testimony that the health and wellness of those employees could be improved. Not having to worry. Having that choice, having that available option. That now in the conference committee, the total hours are limited. Unlike the bill that was voted off the floor. So members, I would encourage adoption of the report.
The member from Wabasha, Representative Drazkowski.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. Members, we have here another union payback bill, and I understand there's another larger union payback bill coming on Saturday, but that's what we have here. We have a bill that ties the hands of Minnesota employers and dictates to them. Government is going to dictate to Minnesota employers the relationship between them and their employees and the accrued sick leave that develops. The base part of the bill is as bad as the addition in conference committee. Both of them are mandates by the government on private sector employers in telling them what they can and can't do between them and their employees. This is not, members, the role of government to be involved here. If it isn't evidence enough to you as reading the first page of the conference report, turn to the second page on line 2.18 or 2.8. It says, this section does not prevent an employer from providing greater sick leave benefits than are provided for under this section. If we are getting into language to that extent, where government is actually making that statement about the level of prescription that we have in the law, our prescriptive level has gone way, way, way overboard. Members, this is a terrible bill. Let's please refuse adoption here and give it a red vote. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The member from Stearns, Representative O'Driscoll.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Will Representative Hansen yield to a few questions?
He will. Representative O'Driscoll.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Well, Representative Hansen, some of the questions that I had you have answered and others have asked. And one area that I just want to double check, does this deal with compensatory time in any way? You had spelled out vacation time versus sick leave. I'm just wondering about compensatory time.
Representative Hansen.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And Representative O'Driscoll, it does not deal with compensatory time.
Representative O'Driscoll.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Representative Hansen, would you yield to another question, please?
He will. Representative O'Driscoll.
If there is a, thank you, Madam Speaker. Representative Hansen, if there is a collective bargaining agreement or other private employment agreement that addresses this otherwise, which would take precedence, the new law, or we would be de facto be rewriting the contract between employer and employee as relates to this provision?
Representative Hansen.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and Representative O'Driscoll. And I believe that question was asked in conference where a collective bargaining agreement that is negotiated always relies on state law. So if this becomes law, it will, as there are new agreements that are being negotiated, they have to comply with state law.
Representative O'Driscoll.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I just have a couple of other questions if Representative Hansen would be so kind as to continue to yield.
He will yield. Representative O'Driscoll.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Representative Hansen, to the extent of the use of this new provision, does it still need to be mutually agreeable between employer and employee? And when I say mutual, that the employer may need an employee to be with them in the morning, but an afternoon appointment might work better. I'm just wanting to make sure that there is a sense of reasonableness between employer and employee that may not cause the employer to have overtime or some other kind of an onerous burden on them while they are trying to accommodate the employee, their personal situation, and the potential of this new law.
Representative Hansen.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And Representative O'Driscoll, I think the example that you provided between morning and afternoon, that's still the employer has that responsibility working with the employee to work out that leave. The statute, if this becomes law, would provide that they can have that leave, but you're still going to have that employee-employer working relationship. And I may anticipate one of your other questions if this doesn't affect FMLA either, because that's a federal law. So that still is something for unpaid leave that can be worked out between the employee and the employer.
Representative O'Driscoll. Further discussion to the report. Representative Moline.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. And I would just encourage you to cast a green vote on this bill. This is a good bipartisan bill, and some of the fiery rhetoric that I heard from my friend Representative Drazkowski was just, frankly, with all due respect, pretty inaccurate. This has nothing to do with unions. You know who was there to testify for this bill was the AARP, Representative Drazkowski. This is about taking care of our elderly parents and grandparents. Representative Rudenbeck, this isn't a new benefit. This is a benefit that you have already earned or accumulated that your employer has already given to you, and this is a way that you can use that benefit to care for a sick loved one. So this is a good bill, members, and I would just encourage you to support it and vote green. Thank you.
The member from Carver, Representative Leidiger.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. You know, I think Representative Drazkowski is right on target on this. To me, the more I look at this, this is a mandate on a lot of the small businesses out there. At least this is the way I'm seeing it at this time, and it's a mandate. It's a state mandate to small business. And I want to ask a couple of questions. Maybe Representative Hansen, if you'd please yield for question.
He will yield. Representative Leidiger.
Thank you. So what happens to a company if they're unable to comply with this provision? I'll start with that question, please.
Representative Hansen.
Madam Speaker, and Representative Leidiger, it'd be the same as if they could not comply with the current law relating to taking children to medical appointments. It would be a Department of Labor and Industry regulatory issue.
Representative Leidiger.
So are there penalties that if he would continue to yield? So are there penalties then that a company would incur? I mean, is there a process? I would imagine what's going to happen is someone would have to make a complaint, and then there would be some process, and a person would have to bring evidence that a company was mean to them or something. I'm not really sure how the process goes. What would happen then?
Representative Hansen.
Madam Speaker, Representative Leidiger, the same as would apply currently for a violation of the statute relating to leave for children to be a Department of Labor and Industry.
Representative Leidiger.
Thank you. But so it's another mandate on companies by government, the small business, that could definitely affect the productivity of that business if it starts opening up all sorts of reasons why they're going to be, mandated by government to let employees off. And, what we're doing is we're making all small business vanilla. Sounds to me like we're making them all try to look like what we do in government or what a lot of the large organizations look like. And actually, as a small business owner, you're really taking away the competitiveness in many industries, competitiveness of companies. So those companies that may choose to go ahead and do something like this particular provision, they might be able to attract better employees as a result. And those that don't, they choose not to, well, then people just may not work there. And we have to be very careful about, government coming in and mandating these things. And I've had at first I was thinking that this might be okay. But the more you think about this from a business owner's perspective, a small business, and rereading what NFIB says, it's something that government should not be getting into. Let businesses operate the way they need to operate to be competitive out there. And if they choose to want to do something like this, they'll do it. And if that's what it's going to take then to attract the best employees, they'll do that. So members, I've got to say vote red on this.
Discussion. Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor of the motion to adopt... Oh, the roll call has been requested. All those in favor of the motion, press your green button. The clerk will take the roll. The clerk will close the roll. There being 93 ayes and 40 nays, The motion prevails. The clerk will give the bill its third reading as amended by conference.
Third reading, Senate File 840, as amended by conference.
Third reading as amended by conference. Discussion. The member from Wabasha, Representative Drazkowski.
Thank you, Madam Speakers. Well, members, please vote no on this bill. And my friend, Representative Moline, thank you for your comments. But the reality is, it's not government that takes care of our parents and grandparents. Government does not take care of them. People do. And this is the businesses that people are employed by, that people are the employers of, and we have government further reaching its tentacles into that relationship between those employers and employees, dictating to them how they can best run their business, dictating and trying to say here from the House floor that we, the government, the people in government can transfer compassion by rules and regulations that limit their ability to do what they know is best as employers, what they know is best for their employees, what they know is best for their patients. It's not government that knows what's best. The cookie cutter of government fails every time. And here we have another cookie cutter that we are trying to impose on the people of Minnesota against their will. We're doing this, members, over and over again with every bill that comes. Please vote no on this terrible piece of legislation. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Representative Moline.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members, and Representative Drazkowski. Yes, this is about family members taking care of their sick family members. That's what it is. Just read lines 1.18 to 1.21. This is about the ability of an employee to care for their sick adult child, spouse, sibling, parent, grandparent, or step-parent with sick time that they have already earned at their place of employment, that their employer has already granted them or confirmed with them. It is sick time that they have accrued at their place of employment, and they are using that sick time to care for a sick family member. And you're right, Representative Drazkowski, we've been trying to get away from the sort of institutionalized history that we've had of putting elderly people in nursing homes and taking them away from their families and out of their homes, and instead allowing their families to care for them. But, you know, we also have a society where a lot of people are working, and they need to be able to take time off of their job with sick time that they've earned to care for their sick loved ones. So that's what this bill is about Minnesotans taking care of their family members when they are ill or when they are in their last years of life. So members, please support this bill.
The member from Carver, Representative Leidiger.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Representative Moline, let me try to be as clear as possible. All you small business companies in the state of Minnesota, you should absolutely give your employees time off to take care of your families. Absolutely should do that. I'm a proponent for all these provisions in this bill. The problem I have is it's not government's job to sit there and tell small business that you got to do it. But every one of you should rise and say, you know, small businesses is a good thing. But it's not for government to be forcing this down the throats of our small businesses. That's the point. That's the point that Representative Drazkowski was talking about. That's what I'm talking about. We can't do this. We can't continue to do this. Have government mandating all these rules onto small business. Let them compete. Let them use things like this as a competitive item to gain as many good employees as possible. That's what we're railing against, Representative Moline. I do appreciate, your understanding of all this and that employers should do this, but government should not mandate this, and that's the point.
The member from Anoka, Representative Hackbarth. Discussion. The member from Mille Lacs, Representative Erickson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And members, Representative Leiter makes a really, really good point. It is not the job of government to tell a small business what to do. I know many employers who are more than willing to provide for this in their negotiations with their employees. So let's think carefully as we take this vote, because we're committed to, as Representative Leidiger said, desiring that our businesses do provide this, but it isn't something that we need to put in state law to tell our small businesses to do. So let's vote red on this.
The member from Hennepin, Representative Anderson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Would Representative Hansen yield?
He will. Representative Anderson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Representative Hansen, can you tell me what kind of testimony did you receive or input did you receive from the Minnesota Intercounty Association?
Representative Hansen.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And Representative Anderson, the Minnesota Intercounty Association had concerns about the bill. They had concerns about, they also testified that they have some counties, like my county of Dakota County, where it will not apply because Dakota County has personal time off. So it doesn't apply. They have other counties where it would apply. They have counties where some bargaining units have personal time off. Some bargaining units have the traditional sick leave and vacation leave. They expressed concern about the cost. They had desired a lower cap, but we had discussions with them about this cap.
Representative Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Representative Hansen, if you could yield to another question. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Hansen, as I understand it, there was a fiscal note that was done in 2008. And in that fiscal note, for the local impact note, I should say, it showed a cost of anywhere from $25 to $27 million for our local units of government. And as I understand testimony in committee, said that local impact note stands. I just want to make sure that if you can verify that, yes, we're looking at our counties and our cities and our school districts, that this will add about a $25 to $27 million cost. Can you verify that for me, please?
Representative Hansen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Representative Anderson, I am not going to verify that that is the cost for local governments because there was subsequent questioning and asking of how can you verify, and that this was a 2008 fiscal note. There were also fiscal notes, I think there were 3 fiscal notes in the span of 2007, 2008. In that period. This bill was considered and passed and vetoed by Governor Pawlenty during that time period. There was testimony and questioning during the conference committee, and again I want to point out that in this conference committee, even though it was a small 3-member of each side conference committee, we allowed as much testimony as could be provided. That the question was if that the counties really didn't know what that cost would be from 2007, 2008 to 2013, because you have had changes in bargaining unit contracts. You now have more use of personal time off. So I'm not going to say that that's an accurate fiscal note, and I want to point out that the fiscal note that was discussed earlier with MMB is not a finalized fiscal note. It was an estimate. The current one is an estimate. And again, there is no formal fiscal note. It was an estimate relating to state employment. And the discussion on 08 was, is this really accurate? Because you have changes, more use of FMLA, more time with personal time off, changes with the employment makeup, changes in times of accrual. So the question also, discussion in terms of the impact of the fiscal note, is you have 40 hours, there was discussion about what do people get when they terminate employment. What's the percentage of sick leave that there's a payout? That may be 25%, that may be 30%, that may be 40%. So there are costs and there are cost savings there. And there was discussion about that this would be a real reflection of time rather and would reduce. And there was testimony about reduction of absenteeism when programs like this are implemented.
Representative Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Representative Hansen. I think you've raised some good points. I think the point to remember for all of us here is if you live in a county or in city or have a school district that doesn't currently use paid time off, PTO, you are going to see some fiscal impact to your local unit of government. And as we all know, that translates to other things like property tax increases. And then also we have an issue of, too, when I look at this, 160 hours, you could have the potential for somebody in a school district missing 20 days or more from the school. And as you know, that's a significant burden on students if they were to miss their teacher for 20 days. I know my husband in his teaching field, he hates to miss a single day. And missing 20 days is quite significant. It certainly changes the perspective of what the child is able to learn in the classroom. So those are some of the concerns that I have. The property tax increase is what we're doing to our kids and so forth. But I appreciate your efforts on this, Representative Hansen.
Representative Hertaus.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And if Representative Nelson would yield for a question.
He will yield. Representative Hertaus.
Thank you. Representative Nelson, is paid time off a state law?
Representative Hansen.
Madam Speaker and Mr. Speaker and Representative Hertaus, no.
Representative Hertaus.
And if Representative Hansen would yield for another question.
He will yield. Representative Hertaus.
Representative Hansen, is paid sick leave a requirement in the private market as a condition of employment?
Representative Hansen.
Mr. Speaker and Representative Hertaus, no.
Thank you, Representative Hansen. Well, to my point, and I made this before this went to conference committee, the purpose of having benefits is mutually a benefit between employers and their employees. So frankly, when you're defining what the minimum benefits are going to be and how you're going to be using them, what you're now doing is really creating a disincentive to provide any sick leave as part of a condition of employment at all. You're actually encouraging the private sector to take away the benefit rather than have it. There's simply no reason that government should be defining how these hours are used and what they're used for. And so this is really a step backwards in terms of what it's like to be an employer and to negotiate those terms with your employees. So I just see the backdoor effort of this in the attempt to try and encourage people to use it. You're mandated it in law, and you're really going to create just the opposite. You're going to take away benefits from workers rather than provide it. So I would encourage a no on this vote.
Representative Howe.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would Representative Hansen yield for a question?
He will. Representative Howe.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Hansen, I just got a question on I believe that you said that it applies to those employers that have over 21 employees. Does it also apply to agricultural farming applications if they have over 21 employees?
Representative Hansen.
Mr. Speaker and Representative Howe, it's just like the existing law. Any employer over 21 employees, just like the existing law that we are amending that says that you can take your child to an appointment and get sick for sick leave. The existing law that's been there for 20 years, the same provision, same issue with employers and employees, more than 21 employees.
Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take... Oh, Representative Rumbeck. Sorry. Thank you, Representative Rumbeck.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Representative Hansen, I just wonder if you would answer a question and sort of confirm this. As I read the bill and consider a hypothetical employee who might be taking advantage then of all of the sick leave and the benefits and so on, is this true? Would a person be able to have, they would have 3 months maximum from FMLA, stack on top of that potentially another month from the sick leave used to care for a person in the family, possibly 4 weeks of vacation. It seems to me if persons were taking that much in a given year, you might have someone with 5 months off. Would that be possible, Representative Hansen?
Representative Hansen.
Mr. Speaker, Representative Runbeck, no.
Representative Runbeck.
Mr. Speaker, Representative Hansen, would you please clarify where I'm off on that?
Representative Hansen will yield. Representative Hansen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and Representative Runbeck. FMLA is worked out between it's a requirement under federal law, but it is worked out with the employer and the employee. So having the stack of a requirement is not there of FMLA plus sick and plus vacation. And again, that vacation time is also subject to the approval by the employer.
Representative Runbeck. Seeing no further discussion on the bill, the clerk will take the roll on the bill. Clerk will close the roll. There being 99 ayes and 35 nays, the bill is passed. As amended by conference and its title agreed to. Message from the Senate.
Message from the Senate. Mr. Speaker, I hereby announce the passage by the Senate of the following Senate files herewith transmitted. Senate File 460, 796, and 1276.
First reading of Senate files.
Introduction and first reading of Senate File 460, an act relating to human services. Moran moves that Senate File 460, House File 739, now in the General Register, be referred to the Chief Clerk for comparison.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. All opposed, no. Motion prevails.
Introduction and first reading of Senate File 796, an act relating to natural resources. Deal moves that Senate File 796 and House File 742, now on the General Register, be referred to the Chief Clerk for comparison.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. All opposed, no. Motion prevails.
Introduction and first reading of Senate File 1276, an act relating to real estate. Portman moves that Senate File 1276 and House File 1377, now on the General Register, be referred to the Chief Clerk for comparison.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. All in favor say aye. Okay. All opposed, no. Motion prevails. Motions and resolutions. Copies of non-controversial motions and resolutions are online and at the front desk. If there's no objection, we'll take actions on those motions first. Hearing no objection, those motions prevail. Announcements. Representative Purcell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The members of the DFL will caucus here briefly when we get done here. So quicker we get over there, quicker we get done. So thank you.
Representative Lull.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Republican members will be caucusing after session upstairs in our caucus room. And Mr. Speaker, when it's appropriate, I wondered if the majority leader would yield for a couple of questions.
She will yield. Representative Lull.
Thank you. Madam Majority Leader, just could you lay out a roadmap for kind of the business for tomorrow, and then I may have a couple of other questions for you as well.
Representative Murphy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and Representative Loon. We'll come in tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. We will break for a caucus right away, and I would anticipate that to be about 60 to 90 minutes long. We have some bills calendared for the day tomorrow. I anticipate we'll also take up the higher ed bill, which has been posted for everybody. We believe the Health and Human Services bill will close up tonight, so we'll have the opportunity to take that up. And on the calendar, if you've been watching, tomorrow we'll take up the bonding bill Representative Hausman has worked on, and the constitutional amendment.
Representative Loon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Majority Leader Murphy. If you would continue to yield.
She will. Representative Loon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Majority Leader Murphy, the game and fish bill has now come over for the Senate, and is this House going to have an opportunity to take that bill up separately and go through the process as we would normally with amendments in that? We have not had a chance to vote on that bill. It has not been through this body, and I just wondered if you could comment on that.
Representative Murphy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and Representative Loon. Members, we plan to calendar the game and fish bill for Sunday.
Representative Loon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and Representative Murphy. Will the 24-hour rule on amendments be intact or waived, or what's the plan for that?
Representative Murphy.
Representative Loon, I believe the 24-hour rule will be intact.
Representative Loon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and Representative Murphy, if she'd continue to yield. Can you give us a little sense about what's happening with the rest of these bills? I'm, looking at the clock and the calendar, and, we're virtually at Friday, and we've got a pretty full schedule for tomorrow. And we still have K-12, the state government finance bill, the legacy bill, environment and agriculture finance bills, transportation bill, and of course the tax bill. I'm not certain how all this is going to get done, Representative Murphy, so I'm wondering, can you lay out how we're planning to deal with this? Is there some plan to roll all of these bills together in one ginormous
we call it the War of 1812 proposals, sort of legendary around here. Are we going to be taking up each of these bills separately with adequate time for debate by the body?
Representative Murphy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Representative Loon, I've heard this question sort of sprinkled around the legislature today about 1812. And the conference committees are finishing up their work. I think K-12 is going to be done soon, and the tax conference committee is working to completion now. And I think soon we will be debating these bills on the floor of the House of Representatives. And I think we would probably have various degrees of definition about what is an adequate amount of time for debate, but they will get their proper airing, and I don't have any intention of rolling them all together into one ginormous bill.
Representative Loon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Majority Leader Murphy. So I understand you have no intention, but do we have your word that you will not be doing that? We are going to be taking each bill separately and debating and voting on it in the House, as is our usual procedure?
Representative Murphy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Representative Loon, we'll be following our usual procedure and rules, and you can take me at my word. I don't have any intention of rolling all of those bills into one ginormous bill.
Representative Loon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And for Representative Murphy, if she would yield to another question. Representative Murphy, I understand some outlines or some frameworks for the tax bill were announced tonight. And I'm just wondering if it's your plan to take that bill up last, perhaps, or where that stands. All we're hearing so far is that the fourth bracket is set at 9.85%. For taxpayers in that bracket, and that there's some kind of a plan to use some of those tax funds to pay for the Viking Stadium since the pull tab revenues come out, and no plan to pay back the shift. So that's all we've heard so far. I wonder if you can confirm that and when we might expect to see that tax proposal on the floor.
Representative Murphy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Representative Loon, I'm looking to see if Representative Lincheski is here on the floor right now, the chair of the Tax Conference Committee. I know that they have continued to work. I saw Representative Lincheski and Senator Skoye, and they were going to go back and work on the Tax Conference Committee and all the details, and I know you serve on taxes, so you know that there's a lot of detail to that. We will see that bill come to the floor of the House very soon, and I certainly don't want to preempt the work that they need to do to finalize those details, specifically some of those questions that you asked. But the outline of the proposal that was just announced is very much about what we promised Minnesotans. So we're going to balance the budget honestly. We're going to do it without gimmicks. The shift is going to get paid back in the next biennium, and there's a plan for that. And we're going to make strong investments in our schools and property tax relief and jobs.
Representative Loon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, thank you, Representative Murphy. If she continued to yield, yes, we may have jobs for a little while yet, but perhaps not if after that tax bill goes through. But Representative Murphy, I'm wondering about timing on these conference reports. As of midnight tonight, conference reports can be filed and brought up immediately. And I certainly hope, as a legislator that tries to read what is before me before I vote on it, can you give some assurances to members that we're going to at least have some time to read these bills? They're not going to come, hot off the photocopier with the first glance being when we're asked to take a vote.
Representative Murphy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and Representative Loon. When we're finished here, we'll be able to read the higher ed bill because it's posted, and soon we'll be able to read the Health and Human Services bill as well, which is great news because I, like you, like to prepare before I vote. And the good news is these bills are going to be coming through. There will be time to read them and prepare, much different than 2 years ago after the government shutdown. I remember getting that Health and Human Services bill on my desk, 15 minutes before I had to vote for it because, of course, it was negotiated in a locked Capitol, and there was no one allowed in that room. So there will be more time this time. You will have time to consider it. And when we finish up here tonight, I can go back to my office and start preparing for tomorrow by reading the higher ed bill.
Hold on. Representative Loon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, and I thank you, Representative Murphy, for that. I'm not sure the word ample could possibly be applied when we're at Friday tomorrow and massive spending bills, but will be hundreds of pages, some of them, to be able to read. So that's I think a debatable concept. And if you would yield to one more question, well, I'll let it go at that. So I thank you, Representative Murphy, and certainly hoping that we'll have as much time as possible for members to read. Certainly, this is not the United States Congress. We try to know what's in the bills before we vote on them, and we'll continue. Oh, I recalled my one last question. In special session, could you comment on whether or not there's a possibility of some kind of special session coming if perhaps things don't come together as you had hoped by our Monday deadline?
Representative Murphy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and Representative Loon. I have no intention of a special session. We don't have an intention of a special session, but that one doesn't rely on us alone. It relies on the entire House of Representatives and the way that we do our work together. Unfortunately, a couple of nights ago, we did watch the Senate debate all night on a piece of legislation, and we're going to take that legislation up here as well, and I know that there's strong disagreement about that proposal, and I hope that we can find a way to work together to have that debate in a way that is meaningful, that expresses our differences, but also allows us to finish our work on time. And that will take all of us together.
Representative Loon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you. And Representative Murphy, I'm glad you brought that up because I forgot to ask about the Saturday plans. And could you enlighten me as to what part of the budget process is being fulfilled through that time devoted to the child care unionization process? I can't seem to figure out how much money that puts into the budget or what that solves with regards to our state's budget. So if you could fill me in on that, I would appreciate it.
Representative Murphy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and Representative Loon, thanks for the question. I think we should talk about the Saturday schedule tomorrow because it'll be a little more clear when I understand which conference committees are finishing up. But I would also like to say, if you'd like, maybe you and I could bring donuts together on Saturday morning and share them with the Minnesota House of Representatives, because that way we could get the day started off well.
Representative Loon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Representative Murphy, since we have heard sort of the frame and outline of the tax proposal, will we expect that conference report is going to be wrapped up tonight and filed?
Representative Murphy.
Thanks, Mr. Speaker, and Representative Loon, that's up to the Tax Conference Committee, and I know they're working.
Representative Loon.
I thank you, and I thank the Majority Leader for her time.
Other announcements. Representative Drazkowski, what announcement do you have?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I wonder if the Majority Leader would yield.
She will yield. Representative Drazkowski.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Madam Majority Leader, I'm concerned about Saturday's schedule. We have the unionization of daycare bill coming. The Senate debated that, as I understand, for 16 or 17 hours. It's a bill that's very important to Minnesotans. There's a lot of concern about that. It was very well vetted in the Senate, as it should be. This being the more deliberative body that it is, twice in size that of the Senate, I would suspect that there would be an appetite for discussion here around that bill that may be at least as much, if not more than that. Realizing that, and given that and the need to get the budget bills done that are ahead of us, certainly the majority manages the time here, but can you tell me, will we be can we be ensured that the majority will not stifle debate on that bill and will not use parliamentary maneuvers in order to stifle the voices of Minnesotans if you do continue to bring that bill forward?
Representative Murphy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and nice to talk with you, Representative Drazkowski. So as I said, I think we should talk about the Saturday schedule tomorrow after we see which conference committees close yet tonight and tomorrow. And maybe you'll want to join me and others in bringing donuts to start Saturday off in a sweet way. And it's my intention to make sure that we finish this session on time, and I'm going to use the tools available to me to make sure that we get that done. But I think the most important tool for us is our ability to focus and get the work done for the people of Minnesota by making sure we're having time to express our different perspectives on positions and issues that divide us, and we get that work done, and we complete our session on time.
Representative Drazkowski.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the majority leader yield?
She will. Representative Drazkowski.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So, Madam Majority Leader, does then, given the fact that we've got a daycare unionization bill that is very contentious in Minnesota, that we clearly understand, given the history in the Senate, will take a great deal of time in order to properly debate, are we seeing then that is a priority that seems to fall ahead of the budget, given the fact that we've got, as Representative Lull pointed out, a number of budget bills that have to come before us yet? I guess there's concern that we put that bill, given the fact that we understand, and it's very clear that will consume a lot of time. Is that the priority that the majority is bringing forward?
Representative Murphy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and Representative Drazkowski. We've been clear about our priorities all along. We're going to balance the budget. We're going to do it honestly without gimmicks. We're going to make strong investments in our schools. We're going to make sure that the shift is paid back in the next biennium. We're going to reduce property taxes for people and pay attention to jobs so Minnesotans and middle-class Minnesotans can thrive and prosper in this economy.
Representative Drazkowski.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and Majority Leader.
Representative Purcell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that when the House adjourns today, we adjourn till 9 a.m. Friday, May 17th.
Representative Purcell moves that when the House adjourn today to adjourn until 9 a.m. Friday, May 17th, 2013. All in favor say aye. All opposed, no. Motion prevails. Representative Purcell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that we now adjourn.
Representative Purcell moves the House to now adjourn. All in favor say aye. All opposed, no. The motion prevails. The House stands adjourned until 9 a.m. Friday, May 17th, 2013.